First of all, l'chaim, right? L'chaim to everybody. A wonderful night of learning Tanya again. And l'chaim to life. That's, it's a week of July 4th. So there's lots of good reasons why not to be here. And we're still here. So l'chaim to that. Right, people think that July 4th, you're not allowed to do anything normal. Your whole schedule needs to go out the window. Why? Because July 4th. In which holy book is it written that you need to cancel your whole life on July 4th? Okay, but it's okay. Listen, as long as it's for happy and healthy celebrations and occasions. Chapter 31. Chapter 31 is a very special chapter, like so many other chapters of Tanya, Chapter 31 is titled From Depression to Joy. Let us understand what's been happening over here, because we are wrapping up a very interesting topic in Tanya. The topic begins with a general rule. The Alter Rebbe is a very big believer that Jews need to be happy. Not once in a while. A Jew needs to always be happy. Sadness, depression, melancholy, worry, guilt, all that is no good. Straight up no good. And the Alter Rebbe is promoting to us this concept. A life of a Jew, the day-to-day of a Jew, needs to be a joyful experience. Okay. Then, 2 chapters ago, chapter 29, beginning with chapter 29, the Alter Rebbe got us into a very interesting, fascinating conversation, which was this idea that sometimes there will be a condition within a Jew which we have called a fossilized heart. And a fossilized heart is when we become spiritually numb. We call it spiritual apathy. For whatever reason it is, and the Alter Rebbe gave us the reason why, but basically, the heart is supposed to react emotionally to stimuli. Our hearts are meant to be reactive. And if there's some type of stimuli, some type of input that's given into the heart reacts. So if we hear something upsetting, we will react with the emotional reaction of anger, disappointment, upsetness, etc. If there's something which is tempting, something which our heart has the whole range of emotions. The heart should be emotionally reactive whenever we put an effort to feel something which is of a holy nature, of a spiritual nature. A lot of people would say, I don't care for God. I don't care for spirituality. Now, if somebody says that, that's their experience, right? Are you going to say it's not true? It's true. Usually the answer is, you're not giving yourself the stimuli. You need to stimulate the heart to feel these things. If you don't stimulate the heart, you're not going to feel anything. Right? If nothing in the world could get you angry, then the idea that you never got angry is not a big deal, because you never stimulated to be angry. It's only a big deal that you don't get angry if you're stimulated, if you're prodded to be angry, and you still keep your cool. So we need to stimulate our heart to be emotionally reactive to good, spiritual, holy things. But imagine a problem where somebody is really trying to feel things and it just simply isn't working. That's a problem. Which means his heart is simply not reacting. And that's a really big problem when you realize that you have a healthy heart in every other area of life. When it comes to eating a 1-inch steak, your heart knows how to get very excited about that. But for some reason, try as you may to get excited about doing a mitzvah, even when you try, you're putting in the effort to stimulate yourself emotionally. Not doing. And that happens because there's something called that your animal soul, the klipa within your animal soul, has risen in arrogance to such a high level that it is totally hijacking your system. And it is able to eclipse the light and the energy of your godly soul. So what do we need to do? We need to somehow reduce the force. We need to reduce the presence of the klipa which is flowing from the animal soul. And what the Alter Rebbe taught us is that the currency of the animal soul is ego, is arrogance. The animal soul loves feeling good about itself. And the way it asserts itself is with an arrogance and a smugness. If you want to try to reduce and break down and push back on the power of Klippa and of the animal soul within your own life, you need to reduce the arrogance. And what the Alter Rebbe taught us in chapter 29 and chapter 30 are ways, are meditations to induce a sense of humility and induce a sense of brokenness. The brokenness of, actually, I am not okay. I am not perfect. I want to be proud of, but I can't stop here. This is too mediocre. We even need to look at other Jews that way. That was chapter 30 that we just learned. You're not allowed to judge another Jew. You have to look at yourself as being smaller than another Jew. The only problem is that the past two chapters have been tough pills. They were tough pills to swallow. These were not the chapters that were necessarily inspiring, although there were a lot of inspiring ideas. But at the end of the day, they were tough chapters. These are not the chapters that make you feel good when you're done learning these chapters, because they're all about highlighting to us our deficiencies, our problems, how spiritually inadequate we are. That's tough. The only problem with that is that there's a certain elephant in the room. The elephant in the room is that things don't seem to be compatible. The Alter Rebbe originally told us, you got to be happy. Now the Alter Rebbe seems to be telling us, you got to break yourself. What happens when you break yourself? You feel bad about yourself. You feel down about yourself. That seems to be the very opposite of being happy. So here the Alter Rebbe is going to address to us this elephant in the room. What is the healthy place? What is the right balance between, on the one hand, having joy and making sure that we're living joyful lives, and at the same time, how does that fit with everything that the Alter Rebbe just told us? And most importantly, if somebody really learns chapter 29 and chapter 30 and learns about these meditations and puts these meditations into practice, chances are you're not going to be feeling that great about yourself. You're maybe going to be a little bit depressed about yourself. Oh, I'm such a bad guy. I thought I'm a good guy. I'm not such a bad guy. So in today's class, we're going to be focusing in a practical way on this idea, the emotions of depression, of bitterness. Is it appropriate in a Jewish life? If yes, how, when, to what degree, and what these emotions serve. So there's a lot of psychology actually in today's class, or let's call it spiritual psychology. And there's a lot of deep ideas. There's a lot of deep ideas in psychology, which I'm not sure if I understand fully myself. To really understand the different ranges of emotions, it's very interesting. So let's learn together and let's see what we come up with. You ready? Let's learn. Chapter 31, From Depression to Joy. And we're going to be learning part 1, Dismantling Your Negativity. Says the Alter Rebbe like this. Now, let's say you deeply pondered these matters at length that we just spoke about in chapter 30 and 29, like for an hour or two, to achieve feeling downcast and brokenhearted. Says the Alter Rebbe, even if you get really depressed by this, do not be concerned. What happens if you start getting depressed? You start really meditate about how spiritually lacking you are, and all of a sudden what happens? You internalize this message to such a deep level, you start getting depressed about it. The Alter Rebbe says, don't be concerned. Which means we kind of have to, let's fill in the blanks over here. Let's read between the lines. For a chassid to get depressed is a red flag. It's a no-no. The Alter Rebbe taught us you're not allowed to be depressed. Here the Alter Rebbe is telling you to do something which is inducing depression. That doesn't sound right. If you have a problem, you go to the doctor, and the doctor prescribes to you a treatment plan, and you start doing the treatment plan, and the treatment plan makes you feel even worse, what do? You run back to the doctor and say, "One second, doctor, is this according to plan? Is this meant to be happening? Because this seems to be counterproductive. I'm coming to get rid of my problem, all now what I have is even more problem." So if I'm trying to break out of my problems, to resume having an inspired, joyous life, and all you've given me is depression, is this working? So the Alter Rebbe says, yeah, don't worry. Don't worry. It's all part of the plan. Why? First we have to appreciate the question. Says the Alter Rebbe, this is true, which means don't be concerned about depression, even though this depression belongs to the realm of Kalipat Noga, not holiness. Depression is not holy. It is Klipa, which is a pretty powerful idea. Because what's happening over here? This person's not getting depressed about the idea that he got a stain on his beautifully, freshly laundered shirt. Right? That's not what's going on over here. This person's getting depressed from spiritual matters. That sounds like it should be holy. Right? If you're depressed that you did a sin yesterday, that sounds holy. Says the Alter Rebbe, no. Depression never comes from holiness. Depression isn't holy. Depression is klipa. Why? Explains the Alter Rebbe. For there's only joy in the realm of holiness. Because in a godly space, there's no room for depression. The atmosphere in the realm of holiness is joy. As it says, it's an unbelievable verse. Strength and happiness are in his place. Where is God? What is the place of God? Where there's strength, not weakness. Weakness is not godly. And happiness. Happiness is godly. Sadness and depression and melancholy and feeling all sluggish, no, that's not godly. If you want to find a godly place, that's happiness. So depression is not holy. And another quote from the Talmud, the divine presence can only reside in a place where there is happiness. And the same applies to studying a halacha. Where's God? Where does the divine presence rest within our universe? Only in a place where there's happiness. If you want to find God within studying Torah, if you want to get in touch with the divinity within Torah, you got to be happy. When you try learning Torah when you're not happy, there's going to be a certain disconnect. You're not getting in touch with the divinity within Torah. You want to find the divine presence while learning Jewish law, while learning Talmud, while learning Tanya, you got to be happy. It's an unbelievable idea. It's a very empowering idea. Our sages tell us that a prophet was not able to receive prophecy unless they were in a very happy space. It just didn't happen. There was never a prophecy while a prophet was in a bad mood. Impossible. It's just totally incompatible. Because God cannot be involved in a place where there's not happiness. So depression, even if it's depression that comes from a very spiritual place, I am spiritually broken, I spiritually feel that I'm in the dumps. I'm saying, sounds beautiful emotions. You want to become a penitent, you want to do teshuvah, not holy. It's klipa. Let's continue reading. So it follows then that a depressing feeling is not a holy experience, but one of klipa. Depression is an experience of klipa. It's only that when this depression is because of spiritual issues that have got you down, while it's still a force of klipa, it's coming from the positive aspect of klipat noga. Okay, so there's one form of klipa which is more benign, which is more neutral, called klipat noga, and there's also positive energy within klipat noga, and the positive energy could be redeemed. Okay, so this is depression coming from a positive place. But still, it's not holy. And the Alter Rebbe adds in the parentheses, and that is why the Arizal wrote that even worrying about past sins, which seems like a very good thing to do, right? You sinned yesterday, it makes sense, you should worry about it. But it's inappropriate, except at the time that you are saying the vidui, which is the prayer in which you privately confess your sins to God, but not at the time of prayer and Torah study. So in the prayer service, right after the Amidah, there's something called the vidui, or the tachnun. It's a short prayer usually. On Yom Kippur it's longer, where we spend 5 minutes, and that's called the confessionary prayer. And part of this prayer is that you bang your chest, you say Ashamnu, Bagadnu, it's time to confess your sins. The Arizal says that's part of prayer, but that is a very isolated part of prayer. That is the only part of prayer that you're allowed to think about sins. It's 5 minutes. But the rest of prayer, you're not allowed to think about sins. And while you study Torah, you're not allowed to think about sins. Why? Because worrying about sins is worry. It's not joy. Prayer must be joyful. So even though we need to think about sins, okay, we'll do it. We're going to limit it to a certain amount of time, and over. That's it. Let's continue reading. Those activities, prayer and Torah study, must be done with the joy that belongs specifically to the realm of holiness. Only holiness, only joy. Only joy that comes from holiness. So we're back to our question. The question is, Alter Rebbe, you told us that in order to break the influence of Klip in our lives, we need to break our hearts. We need to go through this difficult experience, this difficult introspection. We did it. You know what the only problem is? Now I'm depressed. You know what depression is? Depression is Klipa. 1 second. I'm trying to get rid of Klipa. All you're giving me is more Klipa. That doesn't sound right. A treatment plan is meant to get rid of the problem, not give you more problem. I'm trying to get rid of the effect, the influence of Klipa in my lives, and all I've done right now is introduce a new type of Klipa called depression Klipa. Before I had arrogance Klipa, now I have depression Klipa. How is this helping me? I'm not trading Klipa for holiness, I'm trading Klipa with Klipa. So the Alter Rebbe says, so even though depression is Klipa, and even though you're saying that now that you're suffering from this type of depression, this is not clinical depression, by the way, right? Clinical depression you need to go to a doctor for. That's clinical, that's a real thing. We're speaking here about the basic pedestrian depression. You know, we all have bad days. We wake up on the wrong foot, something gets us down, we're just depressed for a little bit about life. That's what we're talking about over here. We're not talking about something dangerous which needs to be addressed by a psychologist or a psychiatrist. Just regular human depression that we all have. We all have bad days. We all have bad moments. That's what we're talking about over here. So we wonder, Alter Rebbe, is this healthy? Is this according to plan? The Alter Rebbe says, yeah. Don't worry, right? That's what the Alter Rebbe told us right away at the beginning of the chapter. Don't worry. Why not? Says the Alter Rebbe, even though this depression is klipa, but nonetheless, sometimes this is the way you need to do things. What? To subdue the sitra achra, you need something of its own type or something that mimics it. You ever heard the line, fight fire with fire? The Alter is saying, fight klipa with klipa. Sometimes you got to do it. Fight the power of klipa with the power of klipa. Use it against itself. As the rabbis would say, very interesting quote, from the forest itself comes the handle of the axe that chops down the forest. Very interesting. What chops down a forest? Nothing other than a piece of wood. Which means, yeah, there's the metal, actual piece. What's it called, right? There's the handle, and then what do you call the actual
blade?
The blade? Okay, the blade. So the blade is not wood. But imagine you try chopping down a tree with just a blade. You'll maybe scratch the tree. You're not getting the tree down. What creates the force, what creates the momentum to knock down a tree is wood itself. So you need the wood to chop down the wood. They don't make axes with a metal handle, right? For whatever reason, it needs to be wood. So our sages, this is an observation from the sages. The forest itself is chopping down itself. If you want to destroy a forest, you need the forest. Our sages say it very interesting about the prophet Obadiah. There's a prophet Obadiah. Obadiah was a convert from the Edomites, which is the descendants of Esau, from Edom. And he was the one who received the prophecies from God about the destruction of Edom, the oppressors of the Jewish people. And our sages say, from the forest itself comes the handle of the axe. For God to destroy Edom, it had to be somebody from Edom. That's the historical context of this. I don't know if any of you are into his music. I'm sure you know about him. You know about Matisyahu, right? The reggae singer. Any of you listen to his music? He has some big hits that are more universally known. Like One Day, One Day? One Day, One Day. Okay. But I remember his very, very first album. I was a kid when it came out. His first album, he was Chabad then. He's gone through a very interesting journey. He was Chabad for a few years and left Chabad, and now he's not religious anymore. He's on his own. Everybody's on their own journey, right? I remember his first album. I should go back and listen. I didn't listen to it in years, probably more than 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. His first album was a very Tanya-inspired album. His first song on the album began with these words: "From the forest itself comes the handle of the axe." It was based on this chapter of Tanya. The song was called "Chop 'em Down." Chop 'em down, chop 'em down. I gotta look up the song. I don't even remember what the song is about, but it was quoting here Tanya. So sometimes you gotta fight the enemy with the enemy itself. Okay. Next, or, says the Alter Rebbe, or like the story of the man who killed a dangerous snake. Story in the Talmud, that they were sitting in the study hall in Babylonia, or in Israel, probably in Israel, and all of a sudden a snake falls down from the rafters into the study hall. And what happens when a snake falls down into the rafters? Everybody starts freaking out, and everybody starts scattering, and there's chaos. And one guy took a tool or something and whacked the snake's head off. It was a dangerous snake. And Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi remarked, the snake met its match. Which means you did to the snake a venomous, snaky act. You've used the snake's own model against itself. Some actually say that Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi was giving a roast to this guy. You know what a roast is? The opposite of a toast. A roast is you roast him. He's throwing him under the bus. Who's saying, you're a vicious man. That's basically what he was saying. You're acting like a snake. See, Rabbi Yodanis was maybe not saying the nicest thing. But the point is, there's an idea from our sages sometimes, in order to fight an adversarial force, use the force of the adversary against itself. So the Alter is saying, we have a problem here. The problem is the arrogance of Klippa has gotten too high. How do we destroy that Klippa? You know what the Alter says? With Klippa itself. Let's use the depression of Klippa to fight off the arrogance of the Klippa. Use fire to fight fire. Fight fire with fire. Fight Klippa with Klippa. And the Alter but therefore says, don't worry about the fact that your meditation and your brokenheartedness led you to depression. Why only in this situation? Why? The Alter says, that is why it is said, there's something to be gained from every depression. There is a gain. If it's a proper depression that the Torah tells us is valid, there will be a gain. Which means we don't like depression. Depression is not holy. Depression is klipa. But there could be a gain from it. If you do it properly, under proper medical, rabbinic advice. If the Alter tells you to do something and you get depressed from it, don't worry, there's going to be a gain. The gain is you break the klipa with this force of klipa. And therefore, says the Alter, what's the gain? The gain is the joy that follows the depression, which we will get to soon. That's a cliffhanger, right? the point is not the depression. Depression is a temporary space that destroys the klipa of your life and allows joy to resume. But we'll get there soon. So here we have the number one basic idea. Now, let's think about this. How does depression klipa destroy arrogance klipa? It's very interesting. Everything about the animal soul, everything about klipa is ego. Right? The animal soul loves feeling good about itself. That's klipa. Klipa just needs to feel itself. It's obsessed with itself. That's the source of the ego and the sense of self that we all have. It's from the animal soul and from the klipa. Klipa is very self-assertive. It's all about itself. Now, therefore, the animal soul loves arrogance because arrogance makes you feel so good about yourself. Give yourself a few things to feel good about yourself. Oh, I'm so talented, and I'm so this, and I'm so that. And the animal soul loves that because that becomes the currency of life. Arrogance and ego is the currency of the animal soul. And we see that. Our animal souls need to always feel good about itself. Animal souls don't like things that don't make us feel good about ourselves, right? But it's very interesting, specifically because our animal soul is so self-obsessed, it's also a trap for depression. Because depression is when you simply are obsessed over yourself. Depression is self-obsession. I am such a loser. I missed that opportunity. I am such an idiot. You're still spinning your wheels in the I. Depression is a weird thing. It's basically you feeling yourself and you not able to function properly because you are stuck and you're fixated on the I. So that's why it's klipa. Depression is klipa because you're just so self-obsessed. Why can't you go to work today? Oh, because I did something stupid yesterday. But so what? You're doing good work. Just move on with life. No. You're creating the scenario that the I hijacks your life. That's klipa. That's literally klipa. That's why it's klipa. But depression, what does depression do? Depression shuts down life. Right? What happens when you're depressed? When somebody's depressed, they don't want to wake up in the morning. They don't want to get dressed. I don't want to take a shower. You want to go out today? No. Let's go out to a restaurant. You want to go out for dinner at a restaurant? No. It saps you of life. So depression is a life killer. Depression is an emotional life killer. People who are depressed, even if it's like a one-day depression, but the fact is, you're not waking up early that morning, energized, let's go change the world today, let's go meet up with friends, let's do something nice today. There's nothing doing when you're depressed. You're going to sit on the couch and do nothing. So let's use klipa depression, which is a life killer, against klipa arrogance. And it's actually interesting that the animal soul both gives off arrogance and gives off depression, but the depression kills off the arrogance. Let's think about that psychologically. That's what happens. Depression basically means you feel so bad about yourself. So all your arrogance and all the ego goes away, which is, it's a very interesting psychology. The ego is creating the depression, and depression kills the ego. So it's like self-harm. It's self-destructive. The animal soul enters a self-destructive loop by being depressed. So the Alter Rebbe says that's good for us, because we're trying to reduce the arrogance of the animal soul. How do you reduce arrogance? By feeling just miserable about yourself, by having depression. So let's use klipa depression to knock down klipa arrogance, and it works. So the Alter Rebbe says, don't worry about it. It's part of the plan, part of the procedure. Fight the fire with fire, and this is the spiritual, psychological mechanics of this. Very fascinating, no? Okay, but the plot continues. Okay, plot continues. And this is another very fundamental idea on the topic of negative feelings, negative experiences. Let's learn. And this is a twist, okay? Things are about to get even more nuanced right now. You ready? Bottom of page 233, bitterness versus depression. Says the Alter Rebbe. Actually, when you get down to it, if the previous meditations were done correctly, the depression should be but a brief moment and pass quickly. And by now, you have moved on to a different kind of experience. See what the Alter Rebbe is saying over here? That actually depression, if you're following the procedure properly, the depression is actually just for a few moments. It's not a lasting depression. It's a very temporary, short, passing phase of depression. But you should be moving on to a brand new experience, which is very different than depression. Follow along. Says the Alter Rebbe, if your heart is broken and your soul bitter because it is distant from the light of God's presence and stuck within the Sitra Achra, if you're having this experience, you feel so broken and you feel, it's not okay. I need to grow. I need to connect with Hashem better. I need to connect with my spirituality better. If you're feeling that, says the Alter Rebbe, that is not called depression. You've got the wrong word. In Hebrew, depression is atzvut. This is not atzvut at all in the Holy Hebrew language. So what is it? Says the Alter Rebbe, listen to this. This is an amazing description here. Depression is when your heart is fossilized like a rock. When there's no life there. What's depression? Depression is when you stop feeling life. That's depression. When somebody wakes up one day and they're depressed, they don't want to do anything about it. I feel down. I feel like a loser. I feel miserable. So what are you going to do about it? Nothing. Depression leads you to nowhere. That's its destination. We are going literally into the abyss, into nowhere. So what are you going to do today? Nothing. I'm going to stay in my pajamas. I'm going to sit on the couch and I'll watch some lousy TV. That's depression. Depression is that nothing's doing right now. But then, says the Alter Rebbe, but then there's an entirely different experience. This is what we call bitterness. The Hebrew is mirirut, bitterness, and a broken heart. Bitterness is the total opposite experience. It is when your heart is energized and full of life, to be stirred and embittered. This experience is from the realm of holiness. You know, in the English language, we really don't have the nuance and precision of Hebrew terms. It's a very big problem. And now that I'm working on this Tanya project, we're seeing this. Hebrew has such phenomenal, perfect terms that describe nuanced ideas which are similar but different. In the Hebrew language, everything's the same. We don't have different terms for different forms of sadness. In English, everything's kind of the same thing. Bad mood, depression, melancholy, sadness, miserable. You know, it's just a bunch of synonyms. In the Hebrew language, there's two different words, and they're very different. They're not only different, they're opposites. They're on two opposite ends of the poles. One's North Pole, one's South Pole. There's something called depression. In Hebrew, it's atzvut. And then there's something called bitterness, mirirut, which means bitterness. What's the difference? The difference is one shuts down life, one creates a surge of life. One says, I feel horrible about myself, and therefore I'm just going to fold into myself in depression. The other one says, I feel horrible about this, and it just, you can't sit down. It shoots you off the chair like a rocket and says, let's do something about this. That's bitterness. Bitterness is life. We got to do something about this. I feel horrible that this is the situation, and I just can't let a moment go by more where we are in this bitter situation. Depression says just shuts you down. Now, in the English language, we would call both depression sadness. In Hebrew, it's totally different words. One is depression, atzvut. Atzvut is no life, and no life is klipa. It's dead. That's why it's klipa. Merirut is full of life. And Merirut is holy. That's a holy experience because it's full of life. Think about this. Imagine a scenario that there's somebody who wakes up one day and realizes that, he's really not a good parent. He has children, but he doesn't keep up with them, and he doesn't give them love. And when they ask for his attention, he's not there for them. And he gets depressed about it. Feel bad about it. Okay. Now there's two. What happens next? Either what happens next is he becomes depressed. He says, I'm such a horrible human being. So what do I do about it? Nothing. I'm just a horrible human being. So tomorrow I'm not going to work. That's one option, okay? Option number two is you realize that, you realize a deficiency, you realize a problem, and you say, you know what? I feel horrible. I can't let this happen anymore. I can't keep on dropping the ball. And you don't rest. You go straight to the phone and call your child and say, this is dad, this is mom. I wanna change course over here. Let's meet up for dinner tonight. Let's go out for dinner tonight. Really? Yeah, we're going out for dinner. The starting point may sound similar, that you're feeling bad about something. But these are worlds apart, says the Alter Rebbe. Depression shuts you down. Merirut fires you up for life. Yeah, it's bitter. You're not feeling good about yourself. You're not motivated from a place of joy. You're motivated from a place of bitterness. But that's life. And the Alter Rebbe says, healthy is like this. I just shut off my ringer. Healthy is that you have a few moments of depression where you really feel lost and shut down. That's okay. For a few moments is okay. And those few moments serve a very important purpose. That shuts down the klipa. That reduces the effect, the power, the influence of the klipa in your life. But right afterwards, hopefully you're moving into Merirut, which is amazing. Because Merirut is full of life. Merirut is holy. That is where we want to be. That's a good optimal space to be in. Now, even Merirut should only be temporary. The goal is always joy. The goal is always has to be joyful. But Merirut is very healthy. Merirut, because Merirut is holy, Merirut is full of life. Merirut is making you do something good. Merirut is making you put your right foot in front of your left foot, and we're moving forward. That's good. And here the Alter Rebbe is going to give us a little bit of the spiritual, psychological mechanics here. It says the Alter Rebbe, holy energy comes in different modalities. Holiness and holy energy comes in different modalities. There is Gevura, which is restrained and strictly judgmental. And then there is Chesed, which is open and flowing. These are different sides of holiness, different Sefirot. There's Gevura, there's Chesed. This bitter energy that you are now feeling comes from the Gevura mode of holiness. Because it's bitterness, that's Gevura. While happiness is from the Chesed mode. So joy comes from Chesed. Bitterness comes from Gevura. But they're both holy. And says the Alter Rebbe, the human heart is composed of both. We have within our heart both modalities. We can experience the openness of joy. We can also experience the tightness of bitterness. But they could both be holy. Says the Alter Rebbe, at times it is necessary to activate the Gevura mode of holiness in order to take a sour situation and turn it around to good. Sometimes the way that we could break out of a bad situation is through bitterness. Sometimes we need the motivation of bitterness. Right? We all know that in life. Usually good motivation is joy. Sometimes we need some bitterness as a motivation. The Alter Rebbe says this is a good opportunity. Sometimes we need to do it. Take a sour situation and make it good. We have to activate the Gevura mode. And says the Alter Rebbe, in this case, the sour situation is that the animal soul and the Yetzer Hara are restricting and dominating you. Heaven forbid. That's not good. So what do? The only way to sweeten that bitterness is by fixing it at its source. And the source of such restriction is in the Gevura mode of holiness. And this is a very deep, mystical, spiritual, Kabbalistic idea. That the source of the Yetzer Hara, the source of the animal soul, is in holy Gevura. Holy Gevurah is the most primal cosmic source for the force of Klippa. And Klippa, the way it manifests in our lives, is holy Gevurah, which has lost touch with its holy origin. And if we want to sweeten the severity of the animal soul, we need to introduce the energy of its source, which is holy Gevurah. If that went a little bit over your head, don't worry about it. It's a big idea. But that's kind of the spiritual mechanics of what's happening over here. The point is, what the Alter is saying is, depression is not good at all, but it could serve a good purpose if it's done on a temporary basis, when necessary, to fight Klippa with Klippa. But it should never last for more than just a few moments. Then there's something called mirirut, bitterness. Bitterness is already good, that's holy. And sometimes we do need to activate mirirut, gevura mode, because that tempers the sourness and the difficulty of the animal soul. But even then, it's good, it's holy, but it should not be the default position of a Jew. Default mode of a Jew is happiness. But sometimes we also need holy severity, holy bitterness. Okay? Let's continue reading. That is why our sages taught that a person should always enrage his Yetzer Tov against his Yetzer Hara. There is an idea, sometimes we do need to get into rage mode to incite the Gevurah within us. And our sages say always. Now, the Alter says, when they say to do this always, they didn't mean that this Gevurah mode should be your incessant state of being. They meant whenever you see that this is what you need. Which means when you feel that you need to introduce holy Gevurah, the bitterness, to temper and soften the blow of the Yetzer Hara, then always use this. And now the Alter says something very, very interesting. And this is a very deep idea. Very deep idea, and it demands a lot of thought. The Alter says the best time, however, when is the best time to get into a holy bitter mode? To do this, which is the designated and appropriate time for most people, is when you are feeling down already. Alter says something amazing. When you're feeling down already, what are you feeling down about? You could be down because you got a flat tire. Or it could be down just because you have no reason why. You woke up in the morning and you're just in a bad mood. Use out that bad mood as an opportunity to go through a holy, bitter experience. Which means you're already in a negative space. So you use that out for a holy negative space experience. Right? Be an opportunist. What's an opportunist? An opportunist is you never let a good opportunity go to waste. Right? So if I'm already feeling down for no good reason, I may as well make it a holy experience. It's interesting. It's a very interesting logic there. So the Alter says there is times when it's a good idea for a Jew to go through holy bitterness, and when's a good time to do it? When you're there already. It's easy. You're already there. Once you're there, all right, it's like you may as well go to the Colosseum if you're visiting Rome. But there's no better time to do it. My kids, just yesterday, we're driving up north, so my kids were listening to story tapes. It's a story tape. So it's like full of these like very corny and stupid jokes. So a guy is saying about his cousin that he lives somewhere else, and he says, what does his cousin do? His cousin also gives bar mitzvah lessons to boys who are about to turn 13, which is probably the best time to give bar mitzvah lessons, because after that is Shein Farfallen. You know the Yiddish? Shein Farfallen means already too late. So, use the opportunity. You're already feeling down. Use the opportunity out. That's what the Alter Rebbe says. Let's read. The best time, however, to do this, which is the designated and appropriate time for most people, is when you are feeling down already. It could be that you are feeling down from some material concern, or it could be just a depression without any cause. Right? Those are opportunities to use out that sadness in a positive way. You're experiencing a stupid sadness. Use it out for a holy purpose. What should you do? Says the Alter Rebbe, you do this by being the master of accounts that we discussed earlier. Start taking spiritual stock taking, which is a bitter experience. You also do it by fulfilling the teaching of our rabbis to enrage your Yetzer Tov against your Yetzer Hara. Get into spiritual rage mode, as we just described. And the Alter says that way you'll rid yourself of the depression over mundane concerns. Instead of feeling bad about your flat tire, you'll actually feel bad about good reasons. Now, this is a very deep spiritual truth, that there are times when we do need to be going through a spiritual negative experience called bitterness. It's not the default position of a Jew, but there are good opportunities for it. And sometimes we have to take initiative and take advantage of different situations. It's very interesting. It's very interesting what the Alter is saying about making sure that we have holy negative experiences in the right time. I'll be very honest for me. I know that this piece of Tanya demands a lot of emotional maturity to really understand it, and I don't think I'm there yet. Some pieces of Tanya I feel like I really relate to it in a very personal way. This, I could feel that it eludes me. But hopefully as we go through life, every time we learn Tanya, we understand things a little bit better. There's an interesting idea that the godly soul needs the animal soul in life. The godly soul cannot function in a body because a body and an animal soul is incompatible. The only way that the godly soul could live within a body is with the medium of the animal soul. So for the godly soul to have a certain experience in real life, it needs the animal soul on the same page, which is why there's a mitzvah to have pleasure on Shabbos. Because Shabbos is meant to be a holy, pleasurable day. But in order for the pleasure to really manifest in real life, we need the animal soul to also be having a good time. So what do? Serve the animal soul good food. When the animal soul is having good food, it's having a good time. If the animal soul is having a good time, then that enables the godly soul to also have a good time. So they need to be in sync. And that is really the reason why in Shabbos we want to feed both souls. Because if one soul is not game, it's not going to work. So the Alter was saying, so too, there are opportunities where the godly soul needs sadness and needs a little bit of negativity. Now, it's not going to work if the animal soul is not on board. So if the animal soul is already in a bad mood, use out that opportunity to create the optimal experience, that both souls could be going through a bad experience, but do it in a holy way, for a holy purpose. But it's a very big and deep idea. But dear friends, that wraps up this conversation about different forms of sadness, when it's appropriate, how it's appropriate, and understand the mechanics of it. But the Alter concludes, which is the cliffhanger for next week, and consequently, you will attain genuine happiness. But the sadness is never the destination. Sadness is never the end game. The sadness is just a step. The goal is genuine happiness. And that, dear friends, finding the happiness, even when we are truthful with ourselves about our deficiencies, that we're going to do next week. And on that note, dear friends, I want to wish you all a wonderful evening. May God bless you all, and thank you for joining. Next week, 7-8, we will be doing Tanya class, continuing chapter 31. Yes, Joel?
Okay, so I don't know, let me see if I understand this. You're saying, I have two questions. First, you're saying that when you are depressed, you could do one of two things. You can continue with your depression and shut yourself down and just get worse and worse and worse. Or you can think, okay, this is the problem. I'm going to try and find a way to get away from this problem or lift myself from my bootstraps and try and rise above, even though it's a bad situation, try and do things that will bring out my happiness or help me resolve
Or address the problem, right? Let me deal with it. I identified a problem. Let's deal with it.
Right. Now, the other question I have, was that correct? Is that what you're trying to say?
That's correct, but the second one is not called depression. The first one's called depression. Depression is when we we just shut down because we're depressed. The second one, the word that the Alter gave it is bitterness.
Bitterness, I got you.
Bitterness.
Okay. So my second question is, I'm a little bit ahead in reading the Tanya, and I don't want to confuse everybody, but I'm confusing myself. But anyway, in this later on in the Tanya, it says that Chesed is how everything was formed. It's God's or Ein Sof, or his everything, and it's hidden by the it's hidden by Gevura. Gevura is what hides God's or Ein Sof or Shekinah, and because if it doesn't, then we wouldn't be able to exist. So is this Gevura similar? It sounds like it's different than the Gevura that you're talking about now and the Chesed.
No, it's all connected. It's all connected.
It's all the what?
It's all connected.
It's all connected. Okay. All right. That's all I want to know. All right.
Maybe as we keep on learning, we'll understand more and more the connections, but it's all connected.
Okay.
So